Hey there. Welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets weird, but the voice stays calm. Tonight, we're wandering into one of the strangest corners of human existence, the things people actually did for fun in medieval times. No screens, no concerts, no theme parks, just mud, animals with opinions, and villagers who mistook chaos for leisure. You'll find yourself in a world where boredom met creativity and both lost, where a pig race counted as an athletic event and a cheese wheel could start a riot. But before you settle in, take a quiet moment to like the video or subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to humanity's bad decisions. And when you're ready, drop a comment telling where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's oddly comforting to know how many of us are awake at the wrong hour, each in our own little century of insomnia. Now, dim the lights. Let the quiet hum of a fan or the soft breath of the night keep you company. We'll drift back together to a village so small it doesn't even have a name. Just smoke, gossip, and the vague scent of turnips. If your mind wanders, that's fine. The story won't mind. It will keep plodding along like a sleepy cow on a muddy road until you drift off. And when you wake, the rooster will still be late for work. So now, let's begin our gentle walk into that world, a place of simple amusements, complicated smells, and laughter that had to last through the plague. Our story starts at dawn, with the kind of morning that happens to everyone eventually, the reluctant kind. The sun doesn't rise so much as it rolls over, like an egg refusing to cook. Its yolk drips lazily across the damp rooftops of a village too old to remember who built it. Smoke wanders upward in crooked ribbons, undecided about where to go. Somewhere, a rooster blinks at the horizon and decides he's not emotionally ready to crow today. Perhaps he's tired. Perhaps he's questioning the point of it all. Or perhaps, after watching the same people trip over the same bucket every morning for 3 years, he's simply resigned from the profession. The silence feels heavier without him. It's the kind of silence that carries judgment. Then suddenly, it breaks. Not with birdsong, but with a loud thud from the bakery. The baker's boy, still half dreaming, falls off his stool and lands on a pile of dough that has developed a personality overnight. The boy blames the oven. The dough blames gravity. No one wins. Inside the bakery, the air is thick with sleep and flour and someone's forgotten sock. The old baker, snoring behind sacks of rye, doesn't stir when a lump of dough deflates in protest. You can almost smell the mixture of yeast, regret, and ambition, the signature fragrance of survival. Outside, the village begins to stretch its limbs. Dogs scratch, pigs sneeze, and a cow named Gertrude strolls through someone's laundry without apology. No one bothers to stop her. They've all seen worse. 2 elderly women sit by the well, wrapped in shawls and certainty. One insists that the sun's too bright, which clearly means bad luck. The other suspects the missing rooster crow is a sign of death, or perhaps a theological error involving goats. A small boy tiptoes past them, carrying a bucket with one guilty-looking fish inside. The fish meant for the Reeves' dinner. He's already imagining how it might taste if he accidentally kept it. As he passes the tavern, a bleary-eyed man stumbles out, clutching a chicken like a trophy and missing one boot. The chicken looks confused. So does the man. You can't tell who regrets the evening more. By now, the forge is stirring. The blacksmith grunts as the first hammer strike of the day echoes through the valley like thunder with a hangover. The sound awakens a dog, 2 toddlers, and a goat that immediately eats the blacksmith's lunch. the cycle of life resumes. Finally, from the rooftop, the rooster sighs. He ruffles his feathers, inhales, and releases a sound that's half crow, half sneeze, half apology. A woman hanging laundry looks up and mutters, "About time." She snaps her sheet like a battle flag, and with that, the village officially surrenders to mourning. Aprons are tied, bread shoved into ovens, children yelled at for licking fence posts. Somewhere, a bell rings. No one knows why, but everyone pretends it means something. The priest practices his sermon in the yard using a sheep as his congregation. The sheep disagrees with his theology, but seems polite about it. The first true scent of the day isn't the bread nor the smoke. It's porridge. Thick, grey, ambitious porridge that gurgles like a bog muttering insults. A woman with one eyebrow and unlimited patience stirs it slowly, muttering something that might be a prayer or a threat. Her husband, already shirtless and sweating, bites into a piece of rye bread so dense it might qualify as armour. He pauses mid-chew, wondering if it's the same slice he abandoned yesterday, possibly last week. Either way, it tastes like persistence. Next door, a little girl pours reused ale into a chipped cup for her grandfather, who swears it settles the stomach. Evidence suggests otherwise. The cup has a crack shaped exactly like the bishop's nose, a coincidence no one ever lets him forget. Around you, the morning orchestra grows, wood snapping, metal ringing, someone screaming, "Not again!" as a chicken sails gently out a window. Hygiene, breakfast, religion, all colliding at once, producing something almost like music. Here, mornings don't arrive gracefully. They stumble in, lose a boot in the mud, and hope no one asks too many questions. The rhythm of life isn't efficient, but it's reliable. Wake, curse, chew, and continue. And as the rooster goes back to sleep, proud of his minimal contribution, the village begins its daily performance. A play with no script, no intermission, and far too many animals in supporting roles. By the time the sunlight fully reaches the muddy street, the day has already decided what kind it will be. Not good, not bad, just ongoing. And in a place like this, that's more than enough. As we drift further into the story, you'll see that fun in this world rarely looks like joy. More often, it looks like survival with a punchline. If you stay in the village long enough, you begin to understand something important. Cleanliness is not a priority here. It's more of a rumour, a whisper carried by travelling merchants who claim to have seen soap used voluntarily. You'd think survival would make people careful, but it mostly makes them practical. And practicality, as it turns out, smells faintly of onions and regret. The morning air, already heavy with smoke and porridge, carries the wet slap of water against wood. A man stands shirtless beside a barrel, splashing his face with the determination of someone trying to erase a past life. He gasps between handfuls, as if battling an invisible crime. Another man chooses a less heroic route, using the corner of someone else's tunic to wipe his nose. Ownership is apparently a flexible concept. Nearby, a woman scrubs her armpits with a handful of moss, muttering either a prayer or a curse. Maybe both. She doesn't stop to clarify. Her technique is vigorous, and she looks like someone who could win an argument with a thunderstorm. In the doorway behind her, a toddler chews on a piece of wood that might once have been part of a spoon his mother doesn't notice. She's trying to pull a slug out of her shoe without waking the baby asleep on her back. Tooth care is a community event. Some chew sticks, others rub ashes on their gums like they're seasoning themselves for later. The brave ones use sour milk, supposedly to scare away the rot. It does, along with conversation. One man insists on rinsing his mouth with ale because it kills spirits. He's not wrong, just confused about which kind. Around the well, a few families perform what they call their sacred morning rituals. These involve gestures somewhere between superstition and choreography. A woman ties garlic to her baby's ankle for luck. Another spits over her left shoulder after feeding the dog. A boy rubs mud on his forehead for strength, then immediately trips over a bucket, concluding that the spell needs work. Across the street, the priest's bell rings once, not for prayer, but because he's still asleep and rolled onto the rope. You can smell the mixture of it all: ash, garlic, smoke, porridge, and something faintly hopeful underneath. It's the scent of human effort, disguised as hygiene. No one here is aiming for purity. They're aiming for slightly less sticky, and that's a kind of progress. The village's official bathhouse, a generous term, is a barrel behind the tavern, shared by whoever gets there first and least hesitates. A thin curtain, long since retired from modesty, hangs nearby. Inside the barrel floats a greyish film that scholars might call evidence of community. The tavern keeper claims he changes the water every saint's day. He never specifies which saint. A few houses claim to have their own wash basins, which are really buckets that have seen things. The wealthier families sometimes add herbs, rosemary, thyme, occasionally something they just think smells moral. When the water is poured out, chickens gather like gossipers, pecking at the discarded bubbles. One of them always falls in. There's a rhythm to it. Splash, curse, feathers, silence. The baker's apprentice tries something new today. He fills a bowl with warm water, dips a cloth in, and wipes his face carefully. For a brief moment he feels refreshed, until the water turns black. He looks into it as if it's revealed a prophecy. He needs a new job. By the forge, the blacksmith cools his hands in a bucket of water used to temper iron. Steam rises, carrying the scent of metal and sweat. He wipes his brow with the same rag he uses for the anvil, which explains a great deal about the state of his complexion. Still, he seems content. The villagers call it the glow of hard work. The truth is, it's mostly soot. Inside a crooked cottage near the stream, a mother pours what's left of yesterday's wash water into a basin. It's tepid, cloudy, but warm enough for her youngest to dip a toe and declare himself reborn. She laughs, not because it's funny, but because it's morning, and laughter helps. She ruffles his hair, rinses her hands, and uses the same water to wipe the table. The table sighs in protest, then accepts its fate. At the edge of the village, a man named Cricket believes he's discovered the secret to cleanliness: singing. He bathes at dawn, loudly, claiming the vibration purifies both body and soul. The song, however, is mostly humming and words that rhyme accidentally. His neighbours have stopped complaining, partly because they've accepted his madness, partly because it's hard to argue with someone naked and enthusiastic before breakfast. Evening is when the true believers emerge. They call it the cooling hour, when the day's dirt becomes history. A few gather by the stream with torches, soap, and a kind of grim optimism. They scrub their hands, their feet, their tools, and sometimes their neighbours if they stand too close. One man insists the water feels spiritual. Another insists it feels cold. Both are right. Every now and then, a traveller wanders through, perfumed, clean-shaven, horrified. He wrinkles his nose and mutters something about civilization. The villagers nod politely and return to scrubbing their moss. Civilization, after all, is a flexible idea. The truth is, no one here is unclean in the way you might think. They're simply efficient. Dirt to them isn't an enemy. It's proof they've been alive that day, that they've worked, eaten, laughed, and survived. Washing it away too often would feel like erasing the story before it's finished. By midday, the scent of smoke has mixed with something faintly herbal, faintly human, and entirely normal. Children splash in puddles and call it bathing. The priest finally wakes, looks out at the sky, and declares it a good day for repentance. He's not wrong, but repentance here is just another word for rinsing what you can and ignoring the rest. So, if you're ever tempted to imagine medieval life as pure chaos, you'd be right. But there's a beauty to it, buried under the soot and the smell. Every stain, every scratch, every patch of moss is a kind of signature. Proof that life was happening, loudly, messily, and without apology. And as the steam from the forge drifts upward, and the last of the morning light filters through smoke and dust, the village glows in its own strange way, a little grimy, a little holy, entirely human. If we follow the thread a little further, the morning's routines give way to something just as essential: the art of talking about everyone else's mistakes. The gossip by the well is about to begin. If you follow the sound of argument past the tavern and the blacksmith's steady chorus of hammer and complaint, you'll reach the centre of the village, the well. It isn't particularly deep, nor especially clean, but it has the rare quality of echoing voices just enough to make gossip sound like gospel. Every village has one. It is less a water source and more a stage. Around it, the morning congregation has gathered. 4 women, wrapped in shawls that could double as siege engines, sit in judgment of all human behaviour within a 5-mile radius. There is Bertha, whose eyebrows form a single decisive line. Martha, who always brings bread and unsolicited wisdom. Agnes, whose hearing is selective but whose opinions are not. And Elizabeth, the youngest at 60, who still insists she remembers what dancing felt like. Together, they form what the villagers affectionately call the Council of Accuracy. A bucket creaks as it descends into the well, carrying silence with it. Bertha breaks it first. She leans forward, squinting. "The rooster didn't crow at dawn," she says. "That means a death before sunset." Agnes snorts. Or indigestion. Depends who's cooking. Martha tears her bread with theatrical precision. "Could be a bad omen," she says through crumbs. Or maybe the rooster's just finally seen the state of this place and given up. Elizabeth sighs, shaking her head as if to scatter younger foolishness. "In my day," she begins, which is how most of her sentences begin, "roosters had manners, so did husbands." The others murmur in agreement, though none can recall what either of those things looked like. A child runs past carrying a stolen carrot like a sword. He trips, recovers, and salutes them gravely. Bertha blesses him automatically, which in her case sounds suspiciously like a threat. From the corner, an old man pushes his wheelbarrow slower than physics allows. He listens without pretending not to. Every so often he adds a nod, a kind of punctuation mark that means, "I am aware of the scandal, and I approve of its existence." The talk, as always, flows like water, round, repetitive, and necessary. It shifts from the rooster's strike to last week's sermon, where Father Aldrich accidentally preached the wrong text and invented an entirely new saint mid-sentence. Martha insists it was divine inspiration. Agnes says it was ale. No one dares to ask which would be worse. Then the subject turns, as it inevitably does, to romance, that favourite form of tragedy disguised as sport. Bertha leans closer. "I saw young Tom in the beet field again," she whispers. "He was holding hands." Elizabeth gasps. "With who?" "Couldn't see. Might have been Anwin." "Might have been a scarecrow," Agnes mutters. "Hard to tell with Tom." They all cross themselves reflexively in case gossip itself counts as sin. Then they continue, louder. It's not malice, it's maintenance, the moral housekeeping of the community. Without it, things might actually change, and no one wants that. By mid-morning, a small crowd has gathered to drink from the well and listen to the tribunal. A young couple approaches, hoping to fill their buckets quickly and escape unnoticed. Bertha spots them immediately. "And where were you two last night?" she asks, smiling the way a cat smiles before education. The couple freezes. The boy stammers something about tending goats. The girl nods too fast. "Ah," says Martha, breaking bread again. "Is that what they call it now?" The crowd laughs, not cruelly but warmly. Here, embarrassment is a social tax, paid daily and with interest. Behind them, the tavern keeper's wife appears, holding a jug of water with the elegance of royalty and the exhaustion of someone who has heard every story twice. She doesn't sit, but she doesn't need to. Her silence is a higher form of authority. When she finally speaks, it's to remind Bertha that her husband still owes her 3 hens from last winter's wager. Bertha blushes, which in her case is an event of astronomical rarity. The talk shifts again to weather, harvest, and the philosophical question of whether chickens possess souls. Martha insists they do, citing St. Margaret's miracle. Agnes says chickens have too much attitude to be spiritual. Elizabeth simply says, if they don't, they should. A gust of wind ripples the shawls and lifts the corners of their stories. The sound of the well's rope creaking mixes with laughter, with scolding, with the faint splash of a bucket returning from below. It is, in its way, the soundtrack of civilization. Not the kind recorded in books, but the kind that keeps people from losing their minds. Occasionally, someone passes carrying a basket or a bundle, and the tribunal pauses just long enough to acknowledge them with a stare that weighs sins automatically. One look equals one confession. One raised eyebrow equals absolution. No paperwork required. Later, when the sun is higher and the day has warmed into its usual muddled ambition, the tribunal disperses. Each woman leaves with new stories tucked neatly under her shawl, ready to be retold at the bakery, the tavern, or to any unfortunate relative within earshot. Their absence leaves behind a quiet that feels heavier than noise, as if the air itself is waiting for the next verdict. Down in the well, the last bucket settles against the stones. Its reflection wobbles gently. The village sky peers down, distorted but whole, like a truth retold too many times. It is a perfect mirror for the place that feeds it, not pure, but honest in its muddiness. As you walk away, you can still hear the faint echo of their laughter, the occasional "did you hear?" and the rhythmic flap of shawls in the breeze. These sounds belong to the heartbeat of the village, steady, unheroic, endlessly human. And if you listen closely, you'll realize something odd. No one here is really cruel. Their gossip isn't punishment, it's participation. In a world this small, speaking about someone is how you remind yourself they exist. From here, the story opens into a quieter corner of that same day, inside the manor up the hill, where ink stains act as official decrees, and one sneeze can rewrite a law. If you climb the narrow path that curls away from the village, you'll find a manor that tries, with limited success, to look important. Its walls lean slightly, as if bored of pretending to be straight. The roof has ambitions of grandeur, but lacks the necessary funding. Inside, the air smells of ink, damp parchment, and faint disappointment. This is where the written world begins, and where sense quietly ends. You enter through a wooden door that has learned to sigh. The corridor echoes with the shuffling of servants, the scurry of mice, and the steady scratch of quills. At the far end, hunched over a table like a man auditioning for despair, sits Lionel the scribe. His job is simple: to record everything that happens within the Lord's estate. His problem is that most of it happens directly on his parchment, courtesy of his own sneezes. Lionel's relationship with ink is adversarial. He dips his quill, leans over a sheet, and inhales. Somewhere deep inside him, destiny stirs. A tickle, a warning, a storm. The sneeze explodes, scattering fresh ink across land deeds, harvest reports, and at least one family crest. The blot spreads like a scandal. He groans softly, blames the dust, and adds a decorative swirl to disguise the evidence. History, he has discovered, is mostly accident control. The Lord of the Manor rarely visits. When he does, he speaks in long sentences and short thoughts. "Make it official," he says, handing Lionel something that might be a tax decree or a grocery list. Lionel bows, sneezes once more, and the order acquires several unexpected dots. These dots, over time, become part of the seal. Bureaucracy, after all, is mostly decoration pretending to be logic. Behind Lionel, the manor cat stretches across a pile of parchment, leaving a trail of paw prints that look suspiciously like a family lineage. He doesn't move her. She's the only one who seems confident about anything. Occasionally, she dips her tail in the inkwell. Artistic collaboration, he calls it. The resulting black smudge on the Lord's letter to the bishop will later be interpreted as a sign of humility. He takes a sip from a mug of what might once have been ale and tries to focus on the day's work, recording deliveries, fines, marriages, and arguments about fences. The parchment crackles faintly, thirsty for purpose. His handwriting, precise and exhausted, fills line after line with the daily theatre of medieval life. To anyone reading centuries later, it will look orderly. In reality, Lionel's quill trembles with suppressed laughter. He writes that Bertha's goat trespassed on the miller's field with ill intent. He notes that the reeve's inspection of the fences revealed confidence and no actual repairs. He documents a chicken theft, a sermon misplaced, and a marriage proposal declined on account of footwear. The ink dries unevenly, curling the corners of each page like smirks. Outside, a servant shouts something about firewood. Another replies with a complaint about taxes. The world hums faintly beyond the window, the sound of a system pretending to function. Lionel looks up, rubs his temples, and sneezes again. A fine mist of ink falls upon his hand, decorating him in accidental hieroglyphs. He mutters to himself, a quiet mantra of exasperated survival. The Lord rules, the reeve observes, the peasants obey, and I rewrite the mistakes. His voice is soft, half buried under the scratching of his quill. You can hear the weariness in it, but also affection, the kind people feel for something ridiculous they can't quite abandon. By midday, the sunlight slips through the narrow window, slicing the room into two worlds, one illuminated, one in shadow. The bright half reveals papers, seals, and the patient chaos of order. The dark half holds everything else: forgotten petitions, unpaid debts, and one dead fly of great historical significance. Lionel sits in the middle, bridging the two with steady strokes. In this manner, reality must first be written before it can exist. Every now and then, a messenger arrives from the village below, bringing scrolls or trouble. Today, it's trouble. The young man bows nervously, holding a parchment damp with rain. The women at the well request a record, he says. They've declared an unofficial saint. Lionel blinks, then sighs. Another one? The messenger nods, embarrassed. Apparently a chicken. Lionel writes the words slowly, savouring their absurdity. Saint Margaret the Feathered, witnessed by 3 elders, 2 children and 1 sceptical goat. He seals it with wax, presses the Lord's stamp into place, and wonders how many future scholars will take this seriously. Probably all of them. He leans back, cracking his neck, and listens to the hum of the manor. A servant drops a bucket somewhere. Footsteps hurry across the hall. Someone sneezes in the kitchen, a distant echo of solidarity. For a moment, everything feels balanced. The manor is still standing, the ink still drying, and the rooster, he assumes, still alive. On the far wall, an unfinished mural attempts to depict virtue. The artist ran out of pigment halfway through, leaving the saints colourless and mildly disappointed. Lionel studies it sometimes and thinks the figures look like accountants awaiting forgiveness. He doesn't know whether that's comforting or not. In the afternoon, he compiles the day's documents into a neat pile, an illusion of completion. The cat jumps onto it immediately, claiming ownership. He doesn't argue. He knows better than to challenge confidence. Instead, he opens a new sheet and begins a poem in the margin. Here lies the truth, disguised in ink, half fact, half sneeze, too tired to think. He pauses, laughs quietly, and continues copying the tax records. The rhythm of quill against parchment becomes its own kind of prayer, one made not to gods, but to the faint hope that someone, somewhere, will read these words and understand how ridiculous it all was. By the time the light fades, the room glows in that specific shade of gold that makes everything, even mistakes, look intentional. Lionel closes his book, wipes his nose, and nods to the cat. "We've preserved civilization for another day," he says. The cat yawns, unimpressed but supportive. Outside, the village murmurs under the lowering sun. The well is quiet, the fields hum with insects, and somewhere a distant cow remembers she is late for her own story. The manor settles into evening. Paper curls softly in the cooling air, like a sigh. Our quiet exploration now turns toward the barn, where Gertrude the cow resumes her role as teacher, philosopher, and reluctant provider of milk. Down the slope from the manor, past the rows of leaning fences and gossiping geese, stands a barn that smells like truth. The air inside hums with straw, patience, and a touch of despair. This is where the world stops pretending to be noble and goes back to being animal. It's warm in the kind of way that doesn't comfort so much as surrender. Here, philosophy takes the shape of a cow named Gertrude. Gertrude is not just a cow, she is an institution. Thick-bodied, long-suffering, and unimpressed by all human ambition, she lives as if eternity were her personal stable. Every villager, at one time or another, has tried to milk her. Few have succeeded. Even fewer have done so with dignity. Gertrude understands her power and uses it wisely, which is to say, vindictively. This morning, her pupil is Edwin, 16, optimistic, and not yet ruined by experience. His mother has declared that it's time he learned a useful skill, which, in the village, could mean anything from mending a fence to apologizing creatively. Edwin, armed with a bucket and dangerous confidence, approaches Gertrude with the solemnity of a knight approaching a dragon. She eyes him without moving, chewing her cud slowly, as though reconsidering her opinion of humanity. Edwin bows, because it feels like the kind of situation that requires ceremony. "All right then," he says softly. "Let's begin." Gertrude exhales through her nose, creating a small weather system. The first attempt goes badly. He kneels, positions the bucket, and pulls. Nothing. He tries again, more politely. Still nothing. Gertrude flicks her tail, a gesture both casual and final, and deposits a generous gift of mud directly across his face. A nearby chicken clucks approvingly. Edwin blinks through the splatter, humility achieved in record time. He wipes his eyes and tries to recall his mother's instructions. "Firm, but gentle," she had said, "like convincing your uncle not to drink." He tries again. One hand slips, the bucket tilts, and the barn floor gains a puddle of ambition. Gertrude swishes her tail again, perfectly on beat. Outside, the blacksmith passes by and peeks through the slats. "First time?" he calls. "Is it that obvious?" Edwin groans. "Your cow's smiling," the blacksmith replies, and walks on. Inside, dust floats lazily through sunlight, streaming from the roof's broken boards. The smell of straw is thick and ancient, like time itself has been stored here for safekeeping. Gertrude shifts her weight with a noise that could be mistaken for philosophy. The lesson continues. By the third attempt, Edwin discovers a rhythm. Pull, pause, breathe. For a brief moment, milk begins to trickle, tentative as diplomacy. The sound is delicate, a soft percussion that feels like victory. He almost smiles. Then Gertrude flicks her ear, snorts, and kicks over the bucket. The milk spills into the straw with dramatic flair. The bucket rolls, wobbles, and comes to rest upside down, a monument to hubris. Edwin sighs, looks at the sky through the hole in the roof and mutters, "Why?" Gertrude answers with a low, rumbling moo that sounds suspiciously like laughter. The old stable hand appears in the doorway, leaning on a broom that has outlived several owners. "Don't take it personal," he says. "She does that to everyone, likes to test character." "What's she testing for?" Edwin asks. "Patience," the man says, "and the ability to take a joke." Edwin nods solemnly, though he's not sure if he's passed or failed. He wipes the last of the mud from his face and starts again. This time he hums. No particular tune, just something the day seems to hum back. To his surprise, Gertrude doesn't move. The bucket fills slowly, quietly, as if she's finally decided to reward effort. The sound is almost holy. When he's done, Edwin sits back on his heels, sweat and straw clinging to his shirt. The milk glows faintly in the light, a small miracle of cooperation. He whispers a thank you, and Gertrude blinks, unimpressed but gracious. The stable hand nods once and leaves, muttering, "Told you, she's a philosopher." Later, as the sun climbs higher, the barn becomes a chapel of small labours. Chickens peck lazily near the doorway. A cat stalks imaginary prey among the hay bales. Dust motes drift in the light like shy spirits. It's the kind of peace that exists only where no one's trying too hard. Edwin carries the bucket carefully toward the cottage, feeling like he's achieved something cosmic. Halfway there, he trips over a rake. The milk spills again, white rivers running through the dirt. He stares at it for a moment, then laughs. "Fine," he says to the air. "Lesson learned." Back in the barn, Gertrude lowers herself onto the straw with the slow grace of a queen retiring to her throne. She chews thoughtfully, considering the nature of persistence. Perhaps she's teaching something deeper, that success, like milk, must sometimes be spilled before it counts. Or maybe she's just chewing. Cows are philosophers of ambiguity. As the afternoon light begins to bend, the barn cools. The smell of hay thickens, sweet and tired. Edwin returns one last time to collect the rake and finds Gertrude half asleep, her breath slow and steady. He pauses in the doorway, not wanting to disturb her. Outside, the fields whisper with wind and insects. The world feels balanced again. He thinks about telling his mother that Gertrude finally cooperated, but he decides not to. Some victories are better kept quiet. The cow flicks an ear in his direction as if to agree. When he leaves, the barn settles back into silence. Straw rustles softly, wood creaks, and somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon makes peace with its reflection. The day has not been perfect, but it has been honest, and perhaps that's the real lesson, that in this age of mud and patience, wisdom doesn't arrive with fanfare. It plods in on hooves, flicks its tail, and dares you to keep trying. From here, the story drifts outward, toward the sound of shouting and laughter, where work gives way to play. The children are beginning their favourite pastime, a turnip war that will decide absolutely nothing. By midday, the fields shimmer under the weight of the sun. The air feels thick enough to chew, and everything alive seems to have slowed except for the flies, who are thriving. The adults have wilted into silence. Their tools move slower, their conversations collapse into sighs. Somewhere beyond the hedges, laughter begins, high, bright, and suspiciously organised. That's never good news. The children have been sent to weed the fields. Gently, their parents said, which was their first mistake. Children, when handed authority over the earth, rarely stop at gardening. They pull a turnip, then another, and then one bright soul, possibly the baker's youngest, lifts his prize above his head like a weapon. He grins. The others grin back. A declaration is made without words. The war begins. Turnips fly. Mud erupts. Buckets become helmets. A goat is briefly knighted and immediately retreats. Two children argue over territory, drawing the front line in dirt using sticks that were once intended for hoeing. The line, of course, dissolves the moment someone sneezes, which only adds to the drama. A girl named Willa charges forward with twin handfuls of weeds, screaming something heroic about cabbage. She trips, falls into a puddle, and is instantly promoted to legend. From the next field over, a farmer looks up, watches for a moment and sighs. He considers intervening, then remembers how quiet the village has been lately. Better this, he mutters, than silence. He turns back to his plough, letting the chaos write its own story. The children's tactics evolve quickly. They build a fortress from discarded baskets, defend it with turnip artillery, and issue loud proclamations of surrender every 3 minutes, just for variety. Someone introduces a ranking system, Captain of Mud, Lord of Worms, and the Unstoppable Potato. No one knows what the titles mean, but everyone wants one. The enemy retaliates by flinging an entire clump of dandelions. The impact is negligible, but spiritually devastating. Within minutes, the battlefield looks less like farmland and more like an early experiment in abstract art. The mud has achieved new levels of democracy. Every face, noble or otherwise, is equalized under a mask of brown. A boy laughs so hard he forgets to breathe. A girl swings a branch and shouts, "For glory and snacks!" Someone begins to sing. The melody is terrible, but it catches. Soon half the army is chanting gibberish with the confidence of soldiers who have never read a rule book. At the edge of the field, the reeve pauses mid-patrol, notebook in hand. He watches the children splatter each other with root vegetables and wonders if he should document this as training for harvest efficiency. After a moment, he decides not to. There's no space in his report for joy. He moves on, muttering something about unregulated enthusiasm. Back on the battlefield, the sun shifts, turning every puddle into a mirror. The reflections wobble with motion. Tiny warriors captured mid-charge, half child, half myth. A small boy climbs onto an overturned barrel and declares himself Emperor of Dirt. His crown is a ring of weeds, his scepter a half-eaten carrot. The army cheers, then immediately overthrows him for poor leadership. Democracy is restored. The noise travels through the village like music, the kind that doesn't require instruments, only lungs and a willingness to sound ridiculous. Dogs bark, chickens flee, and somewhere a horse neighs as if applauding. Even the blacksmith pauses his hammer to listen. For a brief moment, everyone hears the laughter and remembers something ancient. Play is how the world rehearses happiness. Eventually, the battle slows. Energy, like milk, runs out quickly in summer heat. The children sit in the mud, panting and proud. Someone suggests counting victories. Another insists they all won equally, which feels generous but untrue. A small boy declares that the weeds have won, since none of them managed to actually pull any. No one argues. They're too busy drawing faces in the dirt and declaring them saints. One of the older girls, hair plastered to her face, begins to narrate the day aloud in her best storyteller voice. "And lo," she says, "the brave warriors of Turnip Hill did fight valiantly, armed with roots and poor decisions, and though they lost the field, they gained artistic credibility." The others applaud, half sincere, half delirious. From the distance, the smell of lunch begins to drift. Bread, onions, and something hopeful pretending to be stew. The sound pulls them like a tide. One by one, they drag themselves homeward, leaving behind footprints, abandoned buckets, and a legacy of damp triumph. The field settles into stillness again. The weeds, untouched and victorious, wave gently in the wind. A lone turnip lies in the mud, dented but proud. It glows faintly in the sun, as if aware it has become legend. Tomorrow, someone will find it, roast it, and never know its history. Such is the fate of all heroes. As they near the village, the children chatter about their spoils. One scraped knee, 2 missing shoes, and infinite glory. They pass the farmer who saw it all. He nods approvingly. "Good yield?" he asks. "Best one yet," a child answers, clutching a single surviving turnip like a trophy. "Keep at it," he says. "Practice makes louder." By the time they reach the cottages, the laughter has softened into yawns. Mud dries to armour. The noise dissolves into the buzzing of flies and the low hum of the afternoon. The battlefield becomes memory before the last footprint fades. No one writes it down. No one needs to. The story will retell itself tonight, around the hearth, improved with each retelling until it becomes legend. A reminder that in a world built from work and repetition, joy sometimes has to disguise itself as nonsense. And somewhere above them, the sun keeps watching, generous and unbothered, as if it knows that this too is holy. A mud-slicked liturgy of laughter and sweat. If we follow the path of that laughter, it leads us gently to the scent of food. The village gathering for a midday meal where everything tastes like patience and survival. Lunch is ready, though no one will call it that with a straight face. The village bell rings once at midday, a soft metallic yawn that pretends to have purpose. In truth, it means only one thing. It's time to stop pretending to work and begin pretending to eat. The sound drifts through the fields and crooked lanes, gathering the tired, the muddy, and the perpetually unimpressed. It is not a call to feast. It is an invitation to survival. The children, still wearing their turnip war medals in the form of dried mud and grass, drag themselves homeward. The adults, bent from their morning labours, straighten just enough to squint toward the smell of food. The village exhales together, a single long sigh that smells faintly of effort and onions. In the baker's yard, a loaf emerges from the oven that has clearly seen better centuries. Its crust could deflect arrows. Its centre could host philosophical debates about whether it's still technically bread. The baker nods approvingly. "Perfect," he says. "Just like my marriage. Solid on the outside, mysterious inside." He sets it on the windowsill where steam curls upward like a fragile victory. Across the lane, an old woman named Edith slices cheese older than its owner. She treats each crumb as sacred relic. "Don't breathe too hard near it," she warns. "It's temperamental." The cheese has developed a personality, bitter, wise, possibly vengeful. Still, it smells like nourishment if you squint your imagination. The day's stew bubbles over a communal fire pit, the ingredients defying both identification and classification. Potatoes, barley, and something that used to be a bird. The surface quivers with the confidence of mystery. The cook, a woman of endless pragmatism, stirs it once, sniffs, and declares, "Edible enough." Lunch in the village is not a meal. It's a negotiation between expectation and reality. There are no courses, no sequence, no ceremony, only hunger and what dares to resemble food. People gather in small groups under patched roofs or shaded trees. A few share wooden bowls, others eat from their hands. It doesn't matter. The point is to pause long enough to remember they exist. Nearby, two boys argue about whose bread is harder. They test by hitting each other's heads lightly until both declare victory. A woman sitting beside them sighs, tears her loaf in half, and dips it into the stew to soften the blow, literally and figuratively. The beekeeper arrives late, smelling faintly of smoke and honey. His beard glistens with the stubborn evidence of his trade. Everyone eyes him with reverence and caution. Honey is rare, sweet, and deeply political. A small jar can buy forgiveness, or at least distraction. The baker's wife leans closer and asks if he has any to spare. He shakes his head solemnly. "The bees are on strike," he says. She nods in sympathy. She's married, she understands. At the edge of the group, a little girl guards a bowl of porridge that has solidified into something architectural. Her brother pokes it with a spoon and announces it might be used as roofing material. Their mother, without looking up, says, "Then eat it before it sets completely." They do. It doesn't help. The priest joins them, carrying his own lunch, a piece of bread, a wedge of cheese, and an optimism only faith could explain. He sits quietly beside the others, murmurs a blessing that doubles as a complaint, and takes a bite. For a moment, everyone eats in silence, not reverence exactly, but efficiency. The only sounds are chewing, birds, and the soft bubbling of something that might once have been soup. A gentle breeze carries the smell of herbs from someone's garden, thyme, maybe rosemary, the faint perfume of hope. A few heads turn toward it instinctively. "Who has time?" someone calls. "Not me," comes the answer. "We're all out." The laughter that follows is small but sincere. Lunch ends as it always does, not with fullness, but with resignation. Everyone knows dinner will look much the same, if it happens at all. Still, for these few minutes, they are rich in the only currency that matters here: shared endurance. The baker's wife divides her last oatcake into 4 uneven pieces and hands them around. The act is small, but it turns the air tender. A few children wander to the edge of the stream, their bellies quiet, but their imaginations loud again. They skip stones that mostly sink, laugh, and start planning another battle for tomorrow. A goat watches from a hill, unimpressed but curious. As the sun climbs higher, the heat thickens. The men lie back against fence posts. The women rest their arms, eyes half closed. The sound of chewing fades into the steady hum of summer. Even the flies seem slower now, satisfied with their morning victories. From the distance comes a soft humming, a tune without words, carried by the cobbler's apprentice as he walks past, balancing a pile of worn shoes. His song floats above the still air like a lazy thread. It settles somewhere between memory and dream. Lunch leaves behind no grand aftertaste, no satisfaction, only a kind of quiet togetherness. The taste of barely enough becomes a small blessing, almost luxurious in its honesty. They eat to continue, not to celebrate. Yet somehow, that becomes celebration anyway. A few moments later, the baker collects the leftover crusts to feed the pigs. One of the children follows him and asks, "Do pigs like bread?" "They like everything," the baker says. "Even the burnt bits?" "Especially the burnt bits," he replies. "It makes them feel like people." The sun beats down on their backs, and the world seems to blur slightly at the edges, softened by warmth and fatigue. The meal is over, but the day stretches on, long, shimmering, and full of small tasks pretending to be adventures. Somewhere behind the tavern, the cobbler has already disappeared into his shop. The sign on his door reads, "Do not disturb, meditating on arches." No one questions it. In this heat, even sleep counts as philosophy. Our path now drifts quietly toward that crooked workshop, where shoes breathe dust and the air hums with the soft rebellion of rest. After lunch, the world begins to slow. Even the flies take a break. The sun hangs thick over the village like a thought no one wants to finish. The air smells of warm leather, faint glue, and the kind of silence that feels slightly embarrassed to exist. It's the hour when work pretends to continue, but everyone quietly negotiates with the idea of sleep. You follow the trail of soft hammering until it fades into stillness. The sound comes from a narrow workshop wedged between the bakery and the gossiping wall of the tavern. The sign outside reads, "Shoes repaired, souls restored, no miracles promised." Inside, the cobbler sits slumped on his stool, head bowed, fingers curled gently around an unfinished shoe. He is, as he calls it, meditating on arches, which is another way of saying he's asleep. The workshop is a small kingdom of patience. Shoes of every age and confession rest on shelves like retired pilgrims. Some are patched so many times that they've become philosophical about the idea of repair. Others still smell faintly of their owners, sweat, rain, or ambition. The cobbler knows them all by heart. He could tell your story just by looking at your footprint, but right now he's dreaming. His apprentice, a boy with the calm energy of someone who has already accepted his fate, tiptoes around the room. He moves with reverence, tidying scraps of leather, covering his master with a piece of soft felt that smells faintly of sheep and glue. The gesture isn't dramatic, but it feels sacred, an unspoken promise that even rest deserves respect. Outside, the world continues to hum, muffled and distant. A cartwheel creaks. Somewhere a child laughs, too far away to interrupt. Dust floats through a slanted beam of light, turning laziness into choreography. Every mote spins slowly, perfectly unhurried. The cobbler's breath is steady, matching the rhythm of the shop itself. In his dream, he is still at work, tapping nails into the air, repairing the souls of clouds. He's humming softly, a tune that doesn't exist, about shoes that never wear out and roads that never end. It's a good dream, even if it doesn't pay. He shifts slightly, and a small cascade of nails clinks across the floor. The apprentice freezes, watching them scatter like tiny bits of time. He considers picking them up, then decides to leave them. Some things are better unsolved. On the workbench, the unfinished shoe waits patiently. It has seen this before. It knows the cobbler's naps are as necessary as stitches. Rest, after all, is just another form of repair. The shop holds its breath, listening to the soft chorus of everything pausing together, the tools, the dust, the dreams. Through the open window drifts the smell of bread cooling and grass warming. A fly buzzes once, gives up, and lands on a nail. The apprentice sits quietly on a stool by the door, chin resting on his knees. He doesn't dare to speak. There's a peace here that feels borrowed, like sunlight sneaking into a church. Minutes stretch. They stop pretending to be minutes. The boy closes his eyes too, not asleep, but near it. He imagines walking down a road made entirely of leather, soft and endless, with no blisters, no stones. In that imagined silence, he can hear his master's voice, not speaking, just breathing. Eventually the cobbler stirs. His eyelids flutter open, confused but content. He wipes his mouth, looks at the shoe on his lap, and nods approvingly. "Good," he murmurs, "coming along nicely." The apprentice, smiling, doesn't mention that nothing has changed. In this shop, naps count as progress. The cobbler stands, stretches, and the air shifts. Dust stirs from the rafters like applause. He looks at the sunlight slanting across his bench. "Still afternoon?" he asks. The boy nods. "Then there's time," he says, though for what, he doesn't specify. Maybe for work, maybe for another nap. He picks up a hammer, turns it once in his hand, and begins to tap gently along the sole of a half-finished boot. The sound is faint but rhythmic, steady as heartbeat, kind as lullaby. Each strike is measured, soft enough to respect the quiet that came before it. The apprentice begins to hum again, the same aimless tune from earlier. The cobbler joins him without realizing it. Between hammer and hum, the shop fills with something close to prayer. Not the kind for saints, but for survival. The kind that keeps tools from rusting and hearts from breaking. Outside, the village continues its slow spin. The priest sneezes in his garden. The beekeeper curses at a lazy bee. The rooster, still hungover from dawn, makes a half-hearted noise of encouragement. Life stumbles on as it always does. Inside, the cobbler finishes the last seam, holds up the shoe to the light, and smiles. It's crooked, uneven, imperfect, alive. "Good enough," he says softly. "Better than yesterday." He sets it down beside its twin, two small monuments to persistence. He glances at his apprentice. "You did well keeping quiet," he says. The boy shrugs, unsure if it was a compliment or an instruction. The cobbler chuckles. "Silence is a skill," he adds, "and it pays better than talking." The boy nods solemnly, as if he's just been given a secret. The heat outside has begun to fade. The light leans more golden now, the way it does when the world is deciding whether to rest again. The cobbler wipes his hands, hangs his apron, and steps outside. He squints at the sky and says to no one in particular. Still holding together then. The apprentice watches him go, then looks around the quiet shop. The shoes on the shelves seem to breathe. The dust dances once more in the last beam of light. Somewhere deep inside, the boy feels a strange certainty that this mix of labour, patience and naps might be the closest thing to peace that exists. And as he closes the door behind him, The room exhales, grateful for being left exactly as it is. Our quiet exploration now turns toward the church, where Father Aldrich prepares to speak about trust while searching for his missing shoes, a sermon destined to be remembered for all the wrong reasons. The church sits at the far edge of the village, half stone, half optimism. Its bell tower leans slightly to the left, as if embarrassed to be tall in a place so modest. Inside, the air smells of wax, dust, and faintly of cabbage, a reminder that the priest sometimes stores vegetables in the confessional when space runs out at home. It's nearly evening now, and Father Aldrich is having what could generously be called a crisis of organisation. His sermon is missing. Not a page, not a paragraph. The entire thing. He has searched the pulpit, the pews, his desk, his bed, the rooster coop, for reasons he no longer remembers, and still nothing. What remains of his composure could fit inside a thimble. He stands in the aisle, muttering softly, holding one shoe in each hand. The shoes do not match. Neither fits. This fact seems somehow both trivial and symbolic. You can hear him talking to himself as he circles the altar. It must be here somewhere. I distinctly remember writing it, something about faith or fish, possibly both. He stops, stares at the ceiling as if divine intervention might be hiding there. It isn't. The choir arrives first, armed with songbooks and confusion. They find their priest crouched behind the altar, searching for enlightenment under a candle stand. The eldest singer, a woman with the lungs of an archangel and the patience of a turnip, clears her throat. "Father, is this part of the service?" she asks. "It is now," he says, without looking up. As the congregation trickles in, the scene grows more theatrical. Farmers wipe their hands on their tunics, children whisper, and someone's goat escapes its tether, wandering briefly into the nave before deciding religion isn't for her. The bell rings once, late as usual, and the service begins. Father Aldrich steps to the front, still wearing 2 different shoes, still sermonless. He looks out at his people, a collection of tired faces, muddy feet, and one highly judgmental chicken perched on a windowsill, and sighs. "Brothers and sisters," he begins, "today's message is about improvisation." He pauses, waiting for inspiration. It doesn't arrive, but panic does. His eyes dart to the open Bible on the lectern. The pages flutter gently, tauntingly. He picks one at random and reads aloud. "And lo, they wandered and were very confused." He nods gravely. "As are we," the congregation murmurs. A child giggles. Father Aldrich presses on. "The Lord," he continues, "works in mysterious ways, especially when one's sermon has gone missing. This, my flock, is a test of adaptability, of faith and of memory." He scratches his chin. "Mainly memory." Somewhere near the front, old Martha nods approvingly. "Finally, a sermon I understand," she whispers. Encouraged, Father Aldrich grows bolder. He begins to weave a story, part scripture, part accident. He speaks of trust, of farmers trusting the weather, of bakers trusting yeast, of cows trusting that someone will remember to feed them. And faith, he says, is simply trust with a candle on top. The metaphor doesn't quite make sense, but it sounds sincere. The villagers lean in. The children, sensing something new, stop fidgeting. Even the goat, who has returned quietly to the doorway, tilts her head with interest. The priest's mismatched shoes squeak against the stone floor as he gestures. "We are all walking different paths," he says, "but toward the same field." He glances down at his feet and smiles faintly. "Some of us with different shoes." The laughter that follows isn't loud, but it's warm. the kind that forgives you before you finish your sentence. The choir, unsure whether the sermon is over, begins a hymn. The priest waves them down. "Not yet," he says. "I'm feeling inspired." He continues, speaking now without notes, without fear. His words tumble out, uneven but alive. "Faith isn't perfect," he says. "It forgets its place sometimes. It loses things. Sermons, patience, maybe even shoes. But it finds ways to continue." For the first time all day, Father Aldrich looks peaceful. His hands stop trembling. The crowd listens, quiet and still, as dust drifts through the shafts of evening light. A baby gurgles near the back. The purest are men. When he finally finishes, there's a moment of silence so complete it almost feels holy. Then, one by one, people nod. No one says it out loud, but they've understood something, even if no one could explain what. The choir starts again, this time with confidence. Their voices rise, imperfect but honest, blending with the creak of benches and the rustle of skirts. The goat bleats once in approval. The sound fills the small church, spilling through the open door and out into the village, where it drifts upward to join the evening air. Afterward, as the congregation leaves, Father Aldrich remains at the altar, tidying his notes, though he still hasn't found them. The mismatched shoes remain firmly on his feet. He picks up the candle from the lectern and watches the wax drip, slow and steady. Faith, he murmurs to himself, is mostly not knowing what you're doing and doing it anyway. Outside, the sky is fading to violet. The first stars appear, hesitant, like thoughts forming. The priest steps out into the cool air and breathes deeply. The world smells of hay, bread, and forgiveness. He hears laughter nearby, maybe from the tavern, maybe from heaven. It doesn't matter which. The church door closes behind him with a gentle thud. In the darkened nave, a single candle continues to burn. On the floor beside the pulpit, the lost sermon flutters where the goat knocked it down earlier. The pages are smudged, but readable. The title at the top says simply, "On Trust." As we follow that lingering candlelight out into the dusk, the noise of the fields returns. Crickets, footsteps, a quiet conversation that might be love trying to happen. Somewhere among the beats, two young people are about to make fools of themselves beautifully. Evening spreads across the village like a sigh that refuses to end. The fields, gold at noon, now glow a deep red under the fading sun. The air tastes of dust and leftover laughter, the kind that lingers after a long day. Somewhere beyond the last fence, between rows of stubborn beets, two figures linger. They are young, hopeful, and entirely unqualified for what they're attempting. Tom has been sent to gather vegetables for supper. Anwin is supposed to be helping her mother with the laundry. Both have discovered that destiny has better plans than responsibility. They meet in the middle of the field, not because it's romantic, but because neither of them has a sense of direction. For a while, they pretend to work. Tom digs half-heartedly at the soil, muttering something about crop yield. Anwin ties her hair back and hums a tune that doesn't exist. Their shadows stretch long beside them, brushing occasionally like shy hands. Neither mentions it. Both notice. He clears his throat. "Nice beets," he says, instantly regretting it. She raises an eyebrow. "Thank you," she replies. "I grew them myself." There's a silence so thick you could plant another row in it. Tom tries again. "They're very round." "They're beets," she says, "not philosophy." He nods, defeated. Somewhere nearby, a cricket decides to change the subject by being louder than necessary. The truth is, Tom isn't bad with words. He's just terrible at deploying them in sequence. He rehearsed this moment all week, practicing in the reflection of the trough. In those rehearsals, he was witty, charming, even mysterious. Reality, as usual, has ignored the script. He offers her a beet as if it's a bouquet. It's lumpy, covered in dirt, and missing half its leaves, but his expression is so sincere that it somehow becomes an act of poetry. "For you," he says. Anwin stares at the vegetable for a long moment, torn between laughter and faint admiration. "You're giving me a root," she says. "It's symbolic," he replies quickly. "Deep, grounded, full of potential," she snorts, "and smells faintly of manure." "Love does," he says, surprising himself. For a heartbeat, she looks at him differently. Not mockingly, not kindly, just long enough to make him blush. She takes the beet and wipes it with her sleeve, as if it might become something finer under attention. "Thank you," she says softly. "It's red." He nods gravely, as all great gestures are. The sun sinks lower, smearing the horizon with the same colour as her cheeks. The field hums with the last efforts of daylight. Birds trace lazy arcs above them, heading home to places that require less courage. They keep talking in the awkward way people do when they're inventing sincerity for the first time. He tells her about his cow-related trauma. Gertrude, queen of indifference. She tells him about her dream to someday own shoes that match. He laughs too hard. She throws a handful of dirt at him in protest. The dirt lands on his shoulder like a blessing. A breeze picks up, cool and uncertain. It carries the smell of the river, of soap and lilies and something human underneath. The day is exhaling. The field listens. They fall quiet without deciding to. Somewhere, the priest's voice echoes faintly from the chapel, finishing his sermon to no one in particular. His words arrive as fragments on the wind. Trust, forgiveness, maybe fish again. The sound folds into the air, mixing with the rustle of leaves and the steady heartbeat of insects. Anwin sits down between the rows, cross-legged, pulling at the edge of her skirt. "It's funny," she says. "You work all day surrounded by dirt and somehow still think about flowers." Tom shrugs. "Flowers are what dirt hopes to become." She smiles, not because the line is good, but because he meant it. The light dims. The beets glow faintly in the half-dark, round and stubborn like tiny hearts. A few fireflies appear, unsure if it's time. They hover between the two, flickering approval. Tom reaches for another beet, pretending to inspect it. "You know," he says quietly, "if we plant them close together, they grow better." "Are you talking about vegetables?" she asks, "or something else?" He hesitates. "Yes." A laugh escapes her, soft, genuine. It ripples across the rows, startling a bird into flight. The silence that follows is warm, almost full. In the distance, a bell rings for vespers. Neither moves. Time, it seems, has politely stepped aside to let them stay. The horizon melts from orange to blue, and for a moment, everything in the world, the mud, the air, the trembling of leaves, feels perfectly balanced. Anwin finally stands, brushing dust from her dress. "My mother will start worrying," she says. "She'll think you are working," he answers. "She knows me too well for that." They start walking back toward the village, side by side, each pretending not to measure the space between them. When they reach the fence, she turns, still holding the beet. "It's heavier than I thought," she says. "Most worthwhile things are," he replies. She smiles again, a small secret in the corner of her mouth. "See you tomorrow, philosopher." "Same field?" he asks. "Same nonsense," she says, and disappears down the path. Tom watches her go until the last trace of her dress fades into the twilight, He looks down at his hands, still muddy, still clumsy, and laughs quietly to himself. "Round," he says, remembering. "She's right." He tosses another beat into the air, catches it badly, and walks home, whistling a tune that's all wrong but honest. Behind him, the field keeps breathing. The soil is cool again, the insects reclaim their kingdom, and the first star sharpens in the sky. The day's noise dissolves into the low hum of life continuing, indifferent and kind. Tomorrow the field will look the same, but something invisible will have shifted, a quiet note added to the song of the village. As we drift further into the story, the warmth of the evening settles into the cottages. Shoes creak, fires crackle, and somewhere the cobbler snores beneath his arches. The night grows soft around them, preparing to cradle the strangeness of another day. As afternoon leans toward its gentler angle, you hear a steady, patient sound behind the chapel, the small heartbeat of a knife meeting wood. Shavings curl like pale ribbons across the grass. A robin watches from the fence post as if judging the technique. The air smells of sap and dust and a hint of last Sunday's incense that never quite left the stones. This is Brother Cuthbert's corner, where ordinary sticks come to discover their destiny as spoons. You find him sitting cross-legged in the shade, brown robe patched with older brown, hair like hay that lost its way. He has the look of a man who misplaced the world years ago and found something better in the bargain. Beside him, a small pile of branches, a larger pile of finished spoons, and a nest of owl feathers that he insists are for consultation. He taps each spoon once, lightly, as if listening to its biography. Then he smiles, faint and real, the way people do when a joke is so private it doesn't need telling. Children gravitate to him the way crumbs find butter. They arrive in clumps, whispering the latest rumours, that Brother Cuthbert can hear trees thinking, that he once argued with the moon and lost politely, that his spoons make porridge taste like patience. He nods at each story as if all of them can be true on alternating Tuesdays. The smallest child sits at his knee and asks, "Brother, why do you make so many?" He answers without looking up, knife moving in careful strokes. "Because grief eats with us," he says softly, "and joy forgets to bring a bowl." He says things like that often, sentences that sound sensible until you try to store them in your head, where they roll around like marbles and never settle. Monks from the priory keep a respectful distance. They recognize holiness when it refuses to follow instructions. They claim they fear for the integrity of doctrine. In truth, they fear for the integrity of their certainty. Cuthbert tests the rim of a new spoon with his thumb, the way you might test the edge of a cloud. "This one knows how to stir quietly," he says. "Good for babies and arguments." He hands it to a girl whose hair is a map of tangles. She holds it like a relic and promises to use it only for honourable stews. He bows in return, as if knighted by her sincerity. People bring him wood the way others bring the priest questions. A beekeeper offers a length of apple branch with a sweet disposition. A carpenter contributes ash for strength against stubborn soups. Cuthbert thanks them both, then pockets a pebble for reasons he does not explain. He claims every object has a task it prefers. The trick is to listen until it admits it. He listens well. He has the kind of silence that makes other silences braver. He pauses to smooth the blade on a strip of leather, the motion slow and circular. The faint rasp mingles with the chapel's own small noises. A pigeon negotiating with itself in the eaves, a candle stub giving up on being a candle. "The moon," Cuthbert remarks to no one in particular, "is a borrowed tooth." The children nod as if this explains everything. A novice passing by stumbles over the concept and hurries away, chased by a metaphor. When he works, time softens around him. The sun frets less, shadows settle. Even the breeze seems to lower its voice. He carves the bowl of a spoon thin enough for tenderness, thick enough for life. He never measures, but nothing comes out wrong. His hands remember what his mind has chosen to forget, that the world is mostly chisels and mercy. A woman from the laundry bank arrives, sleeves rolled, soap on her elbows, laughing in the way people laugh when their arms are tired, but their faith still has a pulse. "For my sister," she says, offering him a crooked stick rescued from the river. "She's having a weak shape like this." Cuthbert studies the bend and grins. "Perfect," he says. "Curve for comfort, not for courage." He begins to carve. The shavings fall like pale fish, and the river's memory rises in the smell. He speaks to the children about listening to trees, though the lesson is really about listening to other things. Old people, babies, bread dough, the part of your own heart that refuses to file reports. He claims Willow murmurs advice about flexibility, that Oak says very little but means it, and that Elder thinks you should drink more water. A boy asks if turnips have opinions. "Only about being thrown," Cuthbert says gravely. "They prefer to be eaten after being admired." When a spoon is finished, he breathes on it, not as a rite, but as a habit, the simple test of whether it feels ready to meet a mouth. Some he keeps for the poor box near the church door. Some he trades for onions or thread. A few he tucks into sleeves like secrets. Every house in the village owns at least one Cuthbert. Most own 3. People swear Stew behaves better under their guidance. Even grief sits up straighter. Late sunlight thins to honey. The stone of the chapel warms your back when you lean against it. Cuthbert sets aside his knife and stands, flexing creaky knees that sound like modest applause. He shakes the wood dust from his robe and looks at the small crowd with a smile so absent of performance that applause would feel rude. Then, as if remembering a promise to the earth, he steps into the patch of bare dirt behind the chapel and begins to dance. It's not much of a dance by official standards. There are no steps, only a slow agreement between feet and ground. He moves as if negotiating with gravity. A sway, a turn, a pause to consult his toes. The children copy him with exaggerated seriousness. Dust lifts softly, hangs in the air like golden linen, and settles again. For a moment, the dirt itself seems to hum along, the way a table hums when a good story lands on it. A monk peeks around the corner, decides to be scandalized later, and retreats. When he stops, the world doesn't rush back. It strolls. Cuthbert bows to his audience and to the patch of earth that carried him. "Thank you," he tells both with equal respect. He gathers his tools, tucks a feather behind his ear, and hands the last spoon of the day to a boy who hasn't spoken once. "This one," he says, "is for soup and secrets." The boy clutches it as if it might keep his thoughts from spilling. Cuthbert's pile of shavings makes a pale crescent on the ground. He will sweep them into a basket for kindling. Nothing is wasted here, not even quiet. He ties the basket with string and lingers, listening for what the trees are not saying. The bell in the tower murmurs a single note, thoughtful rather than urgent. Work will return tomorrow with its familiar insistence. Today still has a few breaths left. As you step away, the smell of wood and warm stone fades into the sharper scent of soap and river water drifting up from the bank. Voices ripple, steady and bright, the washing rhythm that turns confession into choreography. If we follow the thread of those voices, it leads us down the slope to where the day's stains meet their match. and where stories come cleaner than their tellers. The path from the chapel winds downward toward the river, where the air changes texture. It smells of water and soap and something older, the damp patience of centuries. You can hear it before you see it, that rhythm of cloth and laughter, a syncopated music made of work. The river runs like a long sigh through the valley, its edges lined with reeds and gossip. This is where the women gather, sleeves rolled high, hair pinned with wooden sticks, their skirts darkened by splashes that don't mind drying in the sun. The water is low this season, which means they must lean farther, reach deeper, and talk louder. The sound of scrubbing rises and falls like a hymn that forgot the melody but kept the faith. Buckets line the shore like soldiers who've given up. The air sparkles with droplets that catch the light before vanishing. Somewhere upstream, a child throws a rock the size of ambition, sending a wave that baptizes everyone in reach. No one complains. Getting wet is part of the conversation. Bertha, the same Bertha who presides over the well, stands knee-deep in the shallows, a washboard balanced against her thigh, attacking a shirt as if it owes her money. "Soap's weak today," she mutters. Martha beside her nods. "So's my husband." The two exchange a look of satisfaction that comes from winning at both laundry and marriage. The talk begins slowly, as it always does. Weather, stains, the peculiar way the Reeve counts things that don't need counting. Then, like all good rivers, it finds its current. "Did you hear," says Agnes, wringing out a tunic with professional judgment, "that Father Aldrich preached barefoot?" Elizabeth gasps, nearly dropping a pair of stockings. "Barefoot? In church?" "Two different shoes," Martha corrects, which technically is balance. Laughter bubbles up, bright and harmless. The soap froths in sympathy. Jokes drift down the line, changing shape as they go. Part comedy, part confession. What starts as teasing often ends in truth. One woman sighs that her youngest still wets the bed. Another admits her husband snores like a sermon. There is comfort in the rhythm, the rinse, the slap, the splash, as if the body knows how to release what the heart refuses to name. A girl named Hilda, barely 16, scrubs quietly at the edge. Her eyes are far away, fixed on something invisible between the ripples. Elizabeth notices. "A penny for your thoughts," she says, then adds kindly, "though you'll get a better rate if it's gossip." Hilda blushes. "It's nothing," she murmurs, "just thinking about the fair next month." The others exchange knowing looks. Someone hums a love tune, soap-slapping resumes with exaggerated rhythm. On the bank, a few toddlers crawl in the grass, smearing mud on their faces with the same enthusiasm their mothers reserve for removing it. A dog dozes nearby, snoring in perfect tempo with the work. Above them all, the laundry ropes sag under the weight of damp cloth, transforming the sky into a patchwork of shirts and linens. The wind moves through them gently, turning chores into prayer flags. Every so often, a traveller passing on the road glances down and quickly looks away. The women ignore him. They have seen too many men misunderstand the holiness of clean sheets. Bertha lifts a sheet to the sun, inspecting it like a jewel. "Still grey," she says. "Everything's grey," Martha replies. "That's why we talk so much, to make it shine a little." They break for a moment to stretch their backs, standing in the river's shimmer. The water moves around their legs like time made visible. Agnes takes a sip from her flask. "Medicine," she insists, and offers it around. The laughter deepens, soft and low. Someone starts singing. The melody wanders like a lost bee, but finds its way eventually. The lyrics, improvised as always, mix piety with mischief. Something about saints and socks, angels and aprons. By now, the soap bubbles have drifted far downstream, carrying bits of conversation with them. Fragments of truth disguised as foam. The river accepts everything without judgment. It's the best listener they have. Hilda finally speaks again, so softly the water almost steals her words. "Do you think we'll ever stop doing this?" she asks. "Washing?" Bertha says. "Not unless Sin gets bored." "Talking," Hilda clarifies. Martha smiles, dipping a shirt into the current. "Talking is how we keep from turning into stains." A breeze lifts the hanging sheets, momentarily blinding them in white. For a second, the whole river glows. The women laugh again, not because anything's funny, but because it's all bearable. When the light fades, the world feels slightly newer, not clean, exactly, but refreshed. By late afternoon, the work slows. The piles of washed clothes shrink, the gossip lingers. The women wring out the last garments, folding them with a precision that hides exhaustion. The youngest gather the soap scraps, pressing them together like small miracles that might last another day. Bertha shakes her hands dry and says, "Well, the clothes come clean." Martha finishes the thought, "But not the stories." The others nod. It's not regret, more like acceptance wrapped in humour. As they pack up, the river murmurs approval. One by one, the women hoist their baskets, their laughter echoing across the water. The bank returns to its ordinary quiet, the kind that hums softly in the background of life. A few soap bubbles remain, clinging to the reeds. They catch the sun in their thin skins, holding colour longer than reason allows. Then they pop, tiny confessions released into the air. Back up the hill, a faint sound floats through the heat, the distant strumming of a lute. The notes stumble, repeat, and attempt courage again. Someone new has arrived in the village, bringing music that doesn't quite behave. If we follow the song, it will lead us to a man who knows only 3 melodies, but infinite persistence. Every village attracts one, a traveller who arrives with charm, a lute, and the tragic inability to leave. His name, or at least the name he uses this week, is Sir Eldritch. He calls himself a minstrel, though optimistic noise enthusiast might be more accurate. The first day, everyone welcomes him warmly. By the third, they begin to suspect eternity has taken an interest. He appears one afternoon on the main path, hat tilted at an angle that suggests debt, carrying a lute that looks both confident and wounded. His boots are patched, his smile less so. He bows deeply to the first person he meets, the baker's wife, and announces, "Madam, I bring the gift of song." She blinks, flour on her nose, and says, "Couldn't you bring eggs instead?" Nevertheless, by evening, half the village gathers outside the tavern to hear him play. The anticipation feels noble. The performance feels longer. His first song is about love, the kind that transcends reason, geography, and key signatures. The melody starts somewhere near enthusiasm and wanders off in search of structure. The villagers listen politely, faces arranged in expressions of cautious hospitality. He finishes with a flourish and a note that tries very hard to escape gravity. The silence that follows is almost applause if you squint. Undeterred, Sir Eldritch bows again. "And now, my second song, an epic of valour," he declares. It's the same melody, slightly faster. The words involve a knight, a dragon, and several improbable rhymes with honour. By the end, the knight has married the dragon, and the villagers have learned that valour can indeed be a test of endurance. Still, no one is cruel. They clap modestly, because manners are stronger than truth. Even the tavern goat nods approvingly. Encouraged, the minstrel announces, "And now, the Ballad of Heartbreak." The melody returns, slower this time, like a remorseful cousin of the first two. By nightfall, the crowd has thinned to those too polite or too tired to leave. The blacksmith pretends to sleep upright. The cobbler actually does. The priest murmurs something about purgatory, then forgives himself preemptively. Eldritch finishes, bows once more, and says, "You are most generous, my fine audience." Someone tosses him a turnip. He takes it as currency. The next morning he's still there. He's staying for artistic inspiration, he explains, which is code for the innkeeper hasn't started charging yet. He follows the villagers from task to task, loot always ready. When the shepherds lead their flock, he plays a tune he calls Song of the Meadow. The sheep respond by leaving. At the market, he serenades the cheese merchant, who responds by doubling prices until the music stops. But gradually, against all logic, the villagers begin to find him endearing. His optimism is so persistent it becomes a kind of weather, annoying yet reliable. Children follow him through the lanes, echoing his rhymes with increasingly creative improvements. "The moon is bright, my heart's delight," he sings. "Your socks don't match," they reply, perfectly in time. The women at the laundry bank, now drying linens nearby, hum along sarcastically. Even Brother Cuthbert carves a spoon that he claims sounds better than he does. The reeve, tasked with maintaining order, adds minstrel containment to his list of duties, though he never enforces it. Authority, when faced with enthusiasm, often retreats quietly. By the fifth day, the tavern keeper begins to plot. The minstrel has taken to performing directly outside the door, claiming it enhances ambience. He earns his meals through song, which has resulted in a surplus of sound and a shortage of customers. The villagers meet that night at the edge of the square, whispering like conspirators in a farce. "We can't just throw him out," says Martha. "It's not Christian." "We could pray he leaves," suggests Agnes. "Or sing louder," says the baker's wife. "Please don't," says everyone else. They decide instead to organise a farewell feast, an event so friendly that even the guest of honour will believe it's his own idea. The plan is simple: overfeed, overpraise, and subtly over-imply that his next audience awaits elsewhere. The feast takes place 2 evenings later, beneath a canopy of lanterns and mild deceit. The table groans with bread, stew, and the kind of cheese that forgives nothing. Eldrick beams, mistaking generosity for adoration. "You humble me," he says, tearing into a loaf with heroic appetite. After dinner, he stands, lute shining in the lamplight. "One final song," he declares. The villagers exchange the weary smiles of soldiers facing a familiar battle. He begins to play, the same melody of course, but something shifts. Perhaps it's the wine, or the firelight, or the fact that everyone knows how this story ends. His voice, cracked but earnest, carries over the square. The song somehow works, not because it's good, but because it's honest. He sings about wandering, about never belonging, about singing anyway. The laughter fades. For the first time, they listen without irony. When he finishes, no one claps immediately. The silence this time feels full, not empty. Then the applause comes, gentle, real. That night, for once, Sir Eldritch doesn't play again. He thanks them all, promises to depart at dawn, and means it, or at least believes he does. The villagers go to bed smiling. The next morning, he's gone. Only a few feathers from his hat remain by the fountain, fluttering like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. The tavern keeper exhales deeply. Peace has returned, until someone hears music from the next village over, a familiar melody, heroic and slightly off-key. They laugh, not unkindly. "He's their problem now," says the baker. But there's a note of affection under it, the kind reserved for people you don't miss yet somehow hope are doing well. And in the evening, when the tavern is quiet and the air is thick with the smell of ale and memory, someone hums his tune without realizing it. The melody wobbles, repeats, and lands perfectly off-center, just as he would have wanted. If we follow that tune as it drifts across the lanes, it will lead us to the reeve, walking his daily patrol with notebook in hand, inspecting fences that need nothing but attention. If music fills the village at night, bureaucracy takes the morning shift. The sun is barely awake when the reeve begins his patrol, a ritual both sacred and unnecessary. He carries a quill that never writes, a notebook that never closes, and a posture that suggests deep engagement with invisible problems. His job, officially, is to maintain order. His actual skill is to appear as though order depends entirely on his continued observation. He starts each day the same way, by staring meaningfully at a fence, not any particular fence, just whichever one happens to be standing nearby. He leans in slightly, squints at a post, and nods once, a gesture that communicates, "Yes, I see you trying your best." To an outsider, this might look like idleness. To the reeve, it's leadership. His shoes crunch over gravel as he walks the perimeter of the village, accompanied by the faint squeak of his empty notebook rubbing against his coat. Every few minutes, he stops, pulls out the quill, hovers it over the page, and then carefully writes nothing. It's a precise process, silence made visible. He tells himself that not every act of governance needs evidence. Some only need confidence. The villagers have learned to respect this ritual. When they see him coming, they straighten a cart or adjust a bucket, not because he'll punish them, but because his gaze demands cooperation, the way gravity demands falling. Even the dogs seem to bark more responsibly when he's near. He greets everyone with solemn nods and phrases that could mean anything. "Good progress," he says to the miller, who hasn't milled since last week's rain. "Carry on," he tells the shepherd, whose flock is still in bed. To the baker's wife he murmurs, "Excellent structural integrity," while admiring her new window shutters. She takes it as a compliment. It might be. By mid-morning, he has inspected 7 fences, 2 bridges, and 1 suspicious puddle. The puddle, in his professional opinion, is ambitious. He records this mentally, a phrase he will later repeat to the council with conviction. The council, which consists mainly of himself, and whoever doesn't leave fast enough, will agree wholeheartedly. At the far edge of the village, he stops to examine a gate that hangs crookedly on its hinge. He places one hand on it and listens, as if waiting for confession. "You've seen better days," he says softly. But then again, who hasn't? He pats the wood affectionately. "Doing your best, I can tell." He marks this in his invisible notes under commendable effort. Brother Cuthbert passes by with his basket of spoons. "Talking to Gates again, Reeve?" "Conducting morale inspections," the Reeve replies. Cuthbert smiles. "Do they talk back yet?" "They would," the Reeve says, "if people would stop interrupting them." His authority is a kind of theatre, but no one minds. In a world where little changes, performance keeps the illusion of motion. People need to see someone taking responsibility for the air, even if the air is doing fine on its own. He pauses at the well, where the counsel of accuracy, Bertha, Martha, Agnes, and Elizabeth are already in session. They greet him like a visiting dignitary. "Morning, Reeve," says Bertha. "Have you solved the issue of the rooster's silence?" "It's under review," he replies, tapping his notebook importantly. "Good," she says. "Morale's been uneven since." He nods gravely and continues, though he makes a mental note to commend the rooster for its strategic discretion. The Reeves route is long, but his pace is steady. His mind wanders through the catalogue of things that might go wrong: floods, fires, or worse, uncooperative paperwork. Yet beneath the weight of imagined responsibility, he feels something close to peace. Routine, after all, is its own reward. At noon, he stops by the tavern, not for drink, but for documentation. He sits at a table by the window, opens his notebook to a blank page, and studies it as if it contains state secrets. The innkeeper approaches cautiously. "Everything satisfactory, Reeve?" "For now," he says. "But the chairs could be more compliant." "Compliant?" "Yes." They creak too honestly. The innkeeper blinks, decides that's safer to agree with, and nods. "I'll speak to them." "Excellent," the Reeve says, making an invisible note of visible efficiency. Outside, the children from yesterday's turnip war pass by, reenacting their battle with improved choreography. The Reeve observes them for a moment, then raises a hand. "Splendid discipline," he calls out. "Carry on." The children salute, delighted to have their chaos officially endorsed. By late afternoon, the Reeves' patrol nears its end. He circles back toward the manor, the sun dipping low enough to gild his shadow with authority. On the way, he meets the priest, still barefoot from his recent revelation. "Afternoon, Father," the Reeve says. "Lovely sermon on trust." "I improvised," the priest admits. "I suspected as much," the Reeve replies. "But your delivery was confident, which is the essence of governance." They nod in mutual understanding, two men united by the art of pretending to know what they're doing. Before returning home, he stops once more at his favourite fence, the same one from the morning, weathered and indifferent. He stands before it, hands behind his back, eyes narrowed in dignified assessment. The fence leans slightly, perhaps from age, perhaps from self-awareness. "You've held steady today," he says. That's all anyone can ask. He closes his notebook, still blank, but heavy with meaning. The day has been inspected, approved, and safely declared functional. The village may now continue existing until further notice. As he walks away, the faint sound of laughter drifts from somewhere beyond the square. A bell rings, hesitant but hopeful. The Reeve pauses, listening. Someone must have tugged the wrong rope, but in this village that's how most holidays begin. He sighs, straightens his coat and mutters, "Unexpected civic engagement." If we follow the echo of that accidental bell, it will carry us to the heart of the square, where the smell of pies is already appearing out of nowhere, and joy is preparing to happen without permission. It begins, as all great human events do, with a mistake. A single bell rings at the edge of the village, not the solemn call of vespers, nor the sharp clang of alarm, but one clear, accidental note that drifts through the afternoon air like a thought that forgot its purpose. It comes from the chapel, where Brother Cuthbert, balancing a basket of spoons, has brushed against the rope while chasing a feather. He looks up at the sound, nods approvingly and says, "Ah, that seems like a good idea." Within moments, the idea spreads faster than reason. The baker's wife hears the bell and assumes it's a feast day. The blacksmith hears it and assumes it's a warning, though of what, he can't recall. The children hear it and assume freedom. The tavern keeper, practical as always, assumes profit. And thus, without discussion or plan, the festival begins. By the time the reeve arrives at the square, the transformation is already underway. A table has appeared out of nowhere, covered with mismatched dishes. Someone drags out a barrel of ale that was supposedly reserved for emergencies. This qualifies. A chicken, perhaps inspired by divine misinterpretation, struts across the cobblestones as though appointed master of ceremonies. The baker contributes a pie of mysterious contents, possibly berries, possibly something still moving. "Guess the filling," she declares proudly. "Winner gets to survive." The children cheer. The reeve blinks. "Is this sanctioned?" He asks no one in particular. No one replies. Authority, as always, has been politely overruled by enthusiasm. Brother Cuthbert arrives next, spoon basket swinging, feathers in his hair. "We're celebrating," he announces. "What exactly?" asks the priest, who appears barefoot and already tired. "Continuing to exist," Cuthbert replies. "It's an underrated miracle." The priest considers this, shrugs, and joins the crowd. Someone brings out a drum that has been waiting 10 years for this moment. Someone else finds a flute that has never played in tune and considers that a feature. Soon, music begins, uncoordinated, ecstatic, half memory, half accident. The sound bounces off the stone walls, collecting laughter as it goes. The reeve tries to maintain a sense of decorum. He stands in the centre of the square, pretending to supervise, though his feet are already tapping. "A temporary morale initiative," he declares, "entirely within regulations." Martha hands him a mug of ale. "Then regulate this," she says. He drinks. Regulations collapse instantly. Children weave between adults, chasing ribbons stolen from laundry lines. Someone ties a hat on the tavern goat, who accepts it with noble indifference. A group of women begin a dance that looks suspiciously like an argument with gravity. A man attempts juggling and succeeds briefly before gravity wins that argument too. As the afternoon tilts toward evening, the festival finds its rhythm, that perfect balance between chaos and grace. The baker's wife sings a song about flour and heartbreak. Brother Cuthbert joins on a spoon, producing a percussion so profound it could summon weather. The blacksmith, inspired, begins tapping his hammer on the side of his ale mug, declaring it in the key of labor. Even the priest relaxes. He raises his mug, sloshing ale onto his bare foot, and toasts to divine confusion. "If joy isn't sacred," he says, "then the saints are missing out." The crowd agrees. The air grows thick with laughter, smoke, and the smell of overcooked optimism. At the edge of the square, the children have invented a new contest: goat versus hat. The rules are unclear, but the goat seems to be winning. Near the well, the Council of Accuracy debates whether this counts as a miracle or just an oversight. Bertha insists miracles require documentation. Agnes points out no one can spell documentation. They compromise by declaring it remarkable. The reeve, now seated comfortably on an upturned bucket, surveys his domain. He opens his notebook for the first time all week and writes exactly one sentence: "Everything functioning beautifully." He closes it again with a sigh of satisfaction. As dusk descends, torches flicker to life. Shadows dance along the stone walls, making every villager look briefly heroic. The air hums with that strange electricity that comes only from collective nonsense, the kind that reminds people they are alive and possibly ridiculous, which are often the same thing. Someone, perhaps the baker, perhaps divine mischief, lights the spare candles from the chapel and arranges them in the shape of a circle. The crowd gathers around, faces glowing. Brother Cuthbert steps into the centre, spoon raised like a relic. "To the bell that started this," he proclaims, "and to the feather that started the bell." Everyone cheers, though half of them aren't sure what he means. The priest claps him on the shoulder. "That's theology enough for one night," he says. Music returns, slower now, wrapped in warmth. Couples sway awkwardly. Children doze against barrels. The goat, still wearing its hat, settles by the fire like a satisfied philosopher. A few villagers lean back to look at the stars, surprised to find so many. "Do they always shine this much?" someone asks. "Only when we're looking," someone else answers. By the time the last song drifts into silence, the square has turned into something soft and dreamlike. The tables are sticky with crumbs and good intentions. The ale barrels are mostly empty. The reeve, asleep upright, looks at peace for once. The priest snores beside him, one foot still outside his shoe. Brother Cuthbert sits near the fountain, whittling a final spoon by firelight. The blade moves slow and sure. When he finishes, he holds it up, watching the flame's reflection curve along the bowl. "For remembering," he murmurs, and sets it beside the well. The bell rope sways gently above them, stirred by the night wind. No one touches it, but it rings once anyway. Soft, accidental. A perfect echo of how the whole thing began. The sound spreads through the quiet village, over rooftops and resting animals, through open windows where people sleep smiling. And if you listen carefully, even the fences seem to creak in approval. As we follow the soft hush that comes after laughter, the scene narrows, from the bright square to the dim corners of homes, where dreams begin to gather. The noise fades, but the warmth lingers, like candlelight deciding to stay a little longer. Night drifts in gently, as if afraid to wake anyone. The village exhales after its day of music and ale. The square is quiet now, except for the faint slosh of a forgotten bucket and the low coo of a pigeon who hasn't figured out where pigeons sleep. Candles dim behind shutters. The world softens into the hush that follows laughter. Out beyond the cottages, the meadow glows silver under the full moon, a patient, intrusive witness. It's the hour when courage, much like yeast, finally begins to rise. Tonight is the unofficial time for proposals. No one planned it that way, it just always happens. The moon, nosy and consistent, seems to insist. Couples drift out from the village in quiet pairs, hopeful, nervous, or pretending they just needed fresh air. The grass sways around them like an audience trying not to giggle. Somewhere, an owl hoots encouragement, and somewhere else, a goat appears, uninvited, determined to attend every confession of love ever made within a 10-mile radius. The first pair stands near the stream. He holds a bent copper ring that he's been carrying for weeks, once round, now slightly oblong from nervous pocketing. She stares at it as though it's an artifact from another world. "It's a bit dented," he admits. "I dropped it in the forge bucket." She smiles. "Then it's already used to the heat." He grins, relieved, and slips it onto her finger. It doesn't quite fit, but neither of them care. The goat nods once and walks away, satisfied. Farther up the hill, a second couple struggles with logistics. He has forgotten the ring entirely, but tries to compensate with poetry. Unfortunately, poetry forgets him too. "Your eyes are like two things that match," he begins. "Spoons," she offers. "Moons," he tries. "No, spoons," she insists. They both laugh. The moment works anyway. Another pair is less lucky. She's wearing his cloak by accident. having taken it from the tavern bench without realizing. When he tries to kneel, the cloak's hem catches under his boot, and they both topple into the grass. Their laughter startles a flock of sleeping birds that take off in a single irritated cloud. By the time they stand again, covered in bits of meadow, the romance has survived purely through stubbornness. He says, "So, shall we?" She brushes straw from her hair. "We already fell," she says. "Might as well stay there." Down by the fence, two older souls, not exactly young but not ready to be anything else, share a flask and a conversation shaped like memory. "Do you ever wish you'd done it different?" she asks. "Only on days that end in day," he replies. She laughs, then coughs, then laughs again. He offers her his hand, calloused and familiar. "We could still make it official," he says. "We already are," she answers and leans against his shoulder. The moon approves, though it doesn't say so. Not all the attempts go smoothly. One man mistakes his opportunity entirely and proposes to the wrong person in the half-dark. The intended recipient, watching from 20 paces away, folds her arms and says, "Well, this should be interesting." The next day, everyone will claim they witnessed divine comedy, though the goat, standing at the centre of it all, seems to have seen worse. There's something kind about the way the night holds them, as if even the mistakes are allowed to glow for a while before morning logic arrives to ruin everything. The air smells faintly of crushed grass and cold iron, of ale and uncertainty. The ground, still warm from the day's heat, hums with leftover laughter. A breeze moves across the meadow, and all at once, the silver light seems to tremble. Someone begins to hum a tune. Maybe the minstrels, maybe just an echo of memory. Others join softly, the melody bending like tall grass. Words aren't needed. The sound itself is enough. The goat wanders among them, pausing to inspect each couple with professional gravity. It interrupts one particularly flowery declaration by sneezing. The man takes it as an omen and rephrases immediately. "I mean," he says, "I promise to try my best most of the time." His beloved nods. That's all anyone should. The goat snorts approval and moves on. Above them, the sky is crowded with stars, each one a faint scratch in the dark. Some flicker, some stay still. The villagers, mostly unused to looking up for long, find themselves quietly overwhelmed. It's strange, they think, how the world can feel so big and so small at the same time, like holding someone's hand while standing inside infinity. One of the children from the afternoon's game sits apart, plucking at a dandelion stem. She watches the couples, frowns thoughtfully, and whispers to the goat, "Seems complicated." The goat chews and agrees. Eventually, the cold begins to settle. Cloaks are wrapped tighter, promises softer. The laughter fades into murmurs, then sighs. One by one, the couples turn back toward the village, walking slower than they need to. The moon, satisfied with its matchmaking shift, begins to climb higher, washing everything in that pale colour that makes even the mud look sentimental. By the time the last footsteps fade, only the goat remains, standing like a small monument to witness. It gives a final glance at the field, rings crooked, vows imperfect, joy fragile but real, and then trots home toward the barn where warmth and leftover hay await. The meadow breathes again, the grass whispers its approval. Somewhere a frog begins to sing about everything it understands, which is, admirably, very little. If we follow the path of that song, it will carry us toward the chapel, where a different kind of miracle is unfolding, one with feathers, confusion, and unexpected reverence. A saint, or something suspiciously close to one, is about to be born. The story of Saint Margaret begins, as many saints' stories do, with an accident involving poultry. It's the morning after the moonlit proposals. The village wakes up in fragments, some with smiles, some with headaches, and at least one with a ring stuck to the wrong finger. The air smells faintly of ashes and morning after humility. The church bell rings late, as if embarrassed, and somewhere between the chapel door and divine order, a chicken makes her entrance. No one knows exactly where she came from. Some say she wandered from the baker's yard. Others claim she descended straight from heaven, which would explain both the timing and the attitude. What's certain is this: she walks into the chapel just as Father Aldrich begins Vespers, strutting with the authority of a tax collector and the grace of a potato with wings. The priest pauses mid-prayer. The congregation freezes. The chicken clucks once, sharp and declarative, a sound that means, "I have arrived, and none of you are ready." She makes her way down the centre aisle, ignoring protocol, wagging her tail feathers like a pilgrim unimpressed by relics. The air shifts. Candles flicker. A small child gasps. "It's a miracle!" Bertha whispers. "Or dinner." Father Aldrich clears his throat. "Sisters and brothers," he says, "let us remain calm. It's merely a chicken." The chicken, as if insulted by understatement, flaps onto the altar rail. The choir collectively inhales. The priest blinks at her, unsure whether to bow or negotiate. "Perhaps," he says slowly, "she seeks refuge." The goat, still loitering near the open door like an old gossip, bleats approval. The congregation takes this as a sign. A woman in the back crosses herself. A man whispers, "Saint Margaret returns." "Who's Saint Margaret?" his neighbour asks. "Exactly," he replies, which settles the matter. From that moment, the transformation is inevitable. The chicken becomes Saint Margaret, patroness of lost socks, unfinished chores, and minor disasters avoided by luck. Someone claims she once laid an egg in the shape of a heart. Someone else claims the egg glowed. No one verifies anything, and that's how faith grows best. Father Aldrich attempts to restore order. "Please," he says, gesturing toward the altar, "this is not official doctrine." But the congregation has already begun humming a hymn that didn't exist 2 minutes ago. It has 3 notes and 1 lyric. "Margaret, cluck for us." The chicken, feeling the mood shift, tilts her head and makes a soft noise that could almost be interpreted as divine cooperation. The priest sighs, pinches the bridge of his nose, and looks heavenward. "You win again," he murmurs. Brother Cuthbert arrives late, drawn by the commotion. He takes one look at the altar and smiles. "Ah," he says, "new management." The priest glares, but even he can't suppress a laugh. "You might carve her an icon," Cuthbert adds, "preferably with feathers that look trustworthy." By now, the villagers have decided to formalize things. A small child places a daisy crown on the chicken's head. Another offers a handful of grain which is received with deep piety. The baker's wife lights a candle for the safe return of all unmatched footwear. The goat sneezes, the candle flickers, and everyone gasps. "Miracle," whispers Agnes. "Draught," mutters the priest. Still, the feeling in the room changes. The laughter softens, becoming something else. Not mockery, not quite reverence, but the strange middle ground where humans often find peace. They know it's absurd. They also know it's true, at least in the way truth behaves here. The chicken eventually hops down from the altar and begins pecking at crumbs along the floor. The congregation follows her like pilgrims on a quest for meaning or breakfast. She leads them in a slow procession out into the churchyard, where sunlight filters through the trees and lands on her feathers, turning them gold. A child points and says, "She's glowing." The others agree immediately, because it's easier to believe when the story is beautiful. Father Aldrich steps outside too, still clutching his missile like a lifeline. He watches as the villagers kneel, some sincerely, some playfully, all together. He feels a laugh rising in his chest and lets it out quietly. "Fine," he says to the sky. "You win again." For the rest of the day, St. Margaret reigns over the village with benevolent confusion. She visits the bakery, where she's offered crumbs of the morning loaf. She perches briefly on the tavern roof, causing the reeve to declare an emergency inspection of shingles. She even blesses the laundry bank by stealing a sock, which everyone agrees was her duty. As dusk falls, the villagers return to the chapel to light a single candle in her honour. Father Aldrich watches as the small flame dances in the dim air. "For balance," he mutters, lighting another beside it. "Faith and folly, equal parts." The chicken, unimpressed, settles on the warm stone by his feet. He glances down. "You're not planning to stay, are you?" She blinks slowly, which feels like a yes. One by one, people leave. The last to go is a young woman who hesitates at the door, turns back, and whispers, "Thank you." For what? She can't explain, but gratitude rarely waits for logic. The candle flickers once, almost goes out, then steadies again. The priest sighs, sits in the front pew, and lets the stillness settle around him. The chicken shifts, tucks her head under her wing, and sleeps. The glow from the candle paints the stone walls with a faint warmth, as if holiness were nothing more complicated than light doing its best to stay. Outside, the wind moves through the grass like prayer without words. The goat, faithful usher of all absurd events, stands guard at the door until the moon rises. Somewhere across the field, laughter drifts from a cottage, soft, human, tired. The village, for all its nonsense, feels blessed, not because heaven visited, but because something ordinary decided to stay a while. And if you listen closely as the night deepens, you can almost hear the faint rhythm of stories beginning. Voices gathering around hearths, lies, preparing to become comfort. The day's holiness will soon become legend, one retelling at a time. Night folds over the village like a blanket that smells faintly of smoke, wool, and contentment. Windows glow amber through the fog. Small fires burn low behind crooked shutters. The day's noise has drained away, leaving the kind of quiet that invites imagination to stretch its legs. This is the hour when stories come alive, not because they're true, but because no one minds if they aren't. You can follow the sound of laughter from house to house. Each home has its own variation, some filled with gentle cackling, some with half-asleep murmurs, others with that slow, contagious chuckle that starts in the chest and ends in the air. The villagers gather close to their hearths, knees nearly touching, faces painted by firelight. The flames pop softly, adding punctuation where the storytellers forget to breathe. At one cottage near the edge of the square, an old man clears his throat. His beard is the colour of frost, and his eyes have seen enough winters to know truth doesn't need to hurry. "This one," he says, "is true." Everyone leans closer. That, of course, is the surest sign it isn't. He begins with a voice like gravel wrapped in honey. "Years ago, before most of you were sensible enough to exist, a knight came through this very village. He carried a sword so sharp it could shave shame off a sinner. He was tall, handsome, and profoundly allergic to common sense." The children giggle. "He sought a dragon," the old man continues. but found instead a duck with a temper. The duck, offended by confusion, bit him on the shin and stole his helmet. Some say it still wears it. Laughter ripples through the room. Someone wipes their eyes. The old man smiles, satisfied. Moral of the story: never underestimate waterfowl. Across the way, in another cottage, Martha holds court. Her stories always begin with domestic ambition and end with mild disaster. "So I says to him," she declares, "if the roof leaks, it's God's reminder to stay humble." He says, "If that's so, humility's drowning us." I say, "Good, then we'll be saints." The room roars with approval. Martha's laugh shakes the spoons on the wall. At the tavern, where the fire burns largest, the tone is different, less reverent, more ridiculous. The minstrel's ghost lingers there, though he's long gone. His forgotten lute now serves as decoration above the hearth, slightly warped from ale fumes. A farmer named Tobe takes a sip of beer, stands and announces, "I've got one about St. Margaret." Everyone cheers. "She appeared to me last night," he says solemnly, and said, "Toby, you're drinking too much." So I woke up and switched to smaller cups. The crowd applauds. A toast is raised to moderation, achieved for now in spirit only. The stories weave together across the village like threads in a tapestry that doesn't care about matching colours. Some tales are whispered near sleeping children, half lullaby, half warning. "Don't wander past the hedge at night," a mother says. "That's where lost socks go, and you know who guards them now." The child giggles into the blanket, imagining the saintly chicken patrolling with glowing feathers and righteous clucking. Others drift toward the philosophical. At the cobbler's shop, the apprentice tells a story he swears is true about a pair of shoes that refused to wear out. They said no, he insists. No matter how much the man walked, the soles stayed new. Eventually he got tired before they did. The cobbler, half asleep, mumbles, "That's the dream." Outside, the night deepens. Smoke from every chimney curls upward, meeting the stars halfway. The scent of burning pine and stew fills the lanes, heavy and kind. Inside, words continue to flicker and dance, each story sparking another. No one remembers who started most of them, or why, but that's the point. Ownership of tales is shared like bread. At one fire, the priest listens to a story about himself being turned into a toad for losing his sermon. He doesn't interrupt. It's a good story, and being mythologized is the purest form of forgiveness. When it ends, he claps and adds, "In fairness, I'd have made an excellent toad." Brother Cuthbert drifts between gatherings, spoon in hand, occasionally adding commentary that may or may not belong. "Dreams," he says at one point, "are stories we tell ourselves when we've run out of audience." Someone thanks him. Someone else hands him a potato out of respect. Outside, snow begins to fall, barely a suggestion, more ash than flake. The firelight catches it, turning each speck into a brief miracle before it vanishes on the roofs. Inside, no one notices yet. They're too busy deciding whether the story of the Duck Knight or the immortal shoes is more plausible. A small boy named Robin insists he's seen the duck himself. "Behind the mill pond," he says, eyes wide. "Wearing something shiny." His mother sighs. "That was your reflection, dear." Robin shakes his head. "Then I'm handsomer than I thought." The room erupts again, and then, as it always does, the noise begins to soften. Words stretch into yawns. Someone pokes the fire. The flames answer with a sleepy crackle. The last storyteller of the night, a woman whose voice sounds like worn velvet, begins her tale. "Once upon a time," she says, "a village tried to be perfect, but perfection was bored, So it left. In its place came laughter, and everyone agreed it was a fair trade. No one interrupts her. No one even laughs. They just sit there, watching the fire shrink into a single steady glow, the kind that makes silence feel like participation. When she finishes, the room exhales together. Someone murmurs, "That one's true." No one disagrees. Outside, the snow thickens, soft as ash and brighter than memory. A cat crosses the lane, silent and unimpressed. The world for once feels small enough to hold. If we follow that quiet out of the door and into the cold, we'll find the night listening too. Roofs creaking, animals stirring, people beginning to dream. Sleep doesn't come all at once here. It arrives house by house, like a story walking itself home. By the time the last story drifts into silence, the village has become one large, uneven lullaby. Every cottage hums with its own rhythm of rest, sighs, murmurs, creaking beams, the occasional heartfelt argument with a blanket. The night has settled in completely now, thick as wool, threaded with stars. It smells of smoke and tired laughter, and beneath it all, the faint salt of human sweat, the perfume of survival. You walk through the lanes quietly, listening. Behind the baker's wall, a dog dreams of chasing something slow and delicious. Behind the tavern, someone snores so confidently it could be mistaken for carpentry. The sound reverberates through the beams, low and regular, like a forge keeping time. A few windows are still faintly lit, candles burning down to stubs, stubborn flames refusing to yield to darkness. But mostly, everything has gone soft. Inside the cottages, the beds creak under the weight of fatigue and simple blankets. Sleep in this century is not elegant, it is practical. Mattresses are sacks stuffed with straw, occasionally refreshed, often debated. Every rustle announces the presence of something else, small, persistent, and proud of its work. Fleas, like taxes and gossip, are universal. In one house, a man scratches absent-mindedly and murmurs, "Still here, are you?" As though addressing an old friend. His wife, half asleep, replies, "At least something still loves you." They both chuckle, then drift back into the soft buzz of shared snoring. Across the street, the blacksmith sleeps, sitting up, back against the wall, boots still on. His dreams smell faintly of iron and ale. In them, he's forging something huge and magnificent. A horseshoe for the moon, perhaps, but it keeps melting into a frying pan. He wakes briefly, confused but hungry, then snores again with renewed commitment. The cobbler, meanwhile, dreams of shoes that argue with each other. One insists it's meant for nobility. The other says mud is the higher calling. They debate ethics until dawn, leaving him exhausted from philosophy. Beside him, his apprentice mumbles in his sleep, reciting measurements. Left heel, 3 nails. Right sole, infinite patience. The rhythm blends perfectly with the symphony of other sleepers. If you could hover above the village, the sounds would form a strange, tender orchestra. Deep bass snores from the tavern, mid-range hums from the cottages, high-pitched whimpers from dreaming dogs, and every so often the percussion of someone turning over too quickly, followed by the squeak of a protesting bed. The fleas add their own small counterpoint, unseen but tireless. They travel from ankle to elbow, from story to story, ensuring equality. There's no hierarchy in irritation. Nobles and peasants itch alike. If you listen closely enough, you could almost hear them humming, a song of labour and persistence. They are the night's smallest citizens, and they take their duties seriously. In the priest's house, the situation is theological. Father Aldrich snores in Latin, a language even his dreams struggle to translate. Between phrases, he mutters fragments of yesterday's sermon. Faith is patience with noise, then resumes with the deep, holy resonance of someone confident that forgiveness applies to volume. The chicken, St. Margaret herself, roosts on the windowsill, head tucked beneath her wing, unbothered by doctrine or acoustics. The goat, who has followed her inside as unofficial security, settles by the hearth, chewing softly in her sleep. She dreams of fields with infinite fences and no responsibilities. Every so often, her jaw pauses mid-chew, then resumes, slower, as if savouring the grass of paradise. Outside, the air hums with life even in stillness. Crickets soar their invisible violins. Frogs perform their usual one-note recital near the stream. The river murmurs approval, carrying all the day's forgotten sounds downstream, gossip, laughter, and a faint echo of music. The moon, white and wide-eyed, watches from above, pretending to understand. Somewhere, a child murmurs through a dream. "Don't throw the turnip," she says sleepily, clutching her blanket. Her mother, without waking, pats her shoulder in automatic forgiveness. The blanket shifts, the sigh of fabric against skin, blending with the 1,000 other soft movements that make up the night's pulse. Sleep here isn't silent. It never was. It's noisy, clumsy, full of body and breath. But there's comfort in that, in the shared ungracefulness of resting. Each snore, each grunt, each tiny scratch is proof of continued existence. Life confirming itself through the soundtrack of exhaustion. Around midnight, the wind stirs again, nudging through shutters and thatched roofs. It carries the faint smell of hay from the barn, where Gertrude the cow sighs in her sleep, a sound deep and maternal, like the earth exhaling. The mice rustle in the straw, confident in their industry. One of them climbs over Gertrude's flank, slips, and lands softly in the hay. She flicks her tail once in irritation, then forgives the intrusion immediately. A candle in the Reeves house finally gives up, collapsing into itself with a tiny hiss. His quill rests beside the notebook, which contains nothing but the faint impression of effort. Even asleep, he frowns slightly, as though auditing his own dreams for accuracy. The night stretches thin toward morning. The moon lowers, reluctant to leave its post. The symphony continues, snores in overlapping keys, sighs in counterpoint, fleas conducting tempo changes with admirable enthusiasm. Somewhere near the edge of the village, a rooster clears its throat but decides against starting the day too soon. For once, everyone deserves another hour. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the rhythm of it. This strange harmony of breathing, dreaming, and existing. The sound of a community alive, unremarkable, and therefore extraordinary. It's not peace exactly, but something better, participation in the quiet miracle of still being here. And soon, when the stars begin to fade and the roofs start glowing with the first hesitant light, one pair of footsteps will rise before the rest. Slow, steady, practiced. The barn door will creak open. The world will prepare for its final whisper of the day. The first to stir is Tomlin, the farmer whose body rises before reason does. Dawn hasn't quite arrived. The horizon still sleeps under its blanket of silver haze. But habit has already reached over and shaken his shoulder. He moves quietly so as not to wake his wife, though she's long mastered the art of pretending to stay asleep until coffee becomes possible. Outside, the air is sharp with the smell of dew and wood smoke. Each breath feels like it's cleaning something small inside you. Not your soul necessarily, just the corners you forget to sweep. The ground glitters faintly where frost has kissed it, and the world seems to hold its breath between night and whatever comes next. Tomlin pulls on his coat, one sleeve still damp from yesterday's chores, and crosses the yard toward the barn. The grass crunches softly under his boots, and a few sleepy stars linger above, like coins left behind after the universe paid its bill and wandered off. The moon hangs low, swollen and content. It looks less like a celestial body now, and more like a satisfied witness. The barn door protests with its usual creak, a long complaining yawn. Inside, the air is warm, thick with hay and quiet life. You can smell the sweetness of straw, the musk of animal breath, and that faint trace of manure that no amount of holiness can quite disguise. Gertrude, queen of cows, lifts her head and regards him with the unimpressed serenity of someone who knows she outranks him morally. He pats her neck. "Evening again," he says, though it's technically morning. She snorts, steam curling from her nostrils like a polite ghost. Her eyes, enormous and reflective, catch the lantern light and make her look briefly divine. Somewhere behind her, a mouse scurries across the rafters, carrying what's left of someone else's ambition. Tomlin checks the trough, the latch, the walls, not because he expects anything to have changed, but because checking is how he speaks to the world. The motions are his kind of prayer. Each small task is a syllable in a language older than words. He tightens a rope, moves a pitchfork, scoops a handful of hay, and sets it gently near Gertrude's hooves. She nods once, acknowledging the ritual. Outside, the wind moves through the trees with the same sound as long hair being brushed. The night isn't over yet. It lingers, unwilling to give up its place. Through a crack in the boards, a single star shines like it forgot to go home. Tomlin pauses, looking at it. He has no grand thoughts, no scripture, no poetry. He just stands there, breathing, aware that both he and the star exist in the same frame of time for a few more moments. A soft rustle comes from the corner. The barn cat, small, grey, and always disappointed, emerges from the shadows, tail high, eyes reflecting judgment. She weaves around Tomlin's boots, then leaps gracefully onto a bale. From there, she surveys the kingdom. Cow, farmer, hay, dust. She seems satisfied that everything continues to be adequately imperfect. Gertrude sighs, a deep, resonant sound that feels like the barn itself exhaling. Tomlin smiles. "You're right," he says. "We made it through another one." He sits on the stool by the door, elbows on his knees, lantern light flickering across his face. The flame dances lazily, gold against the cool grey of dawn. He listens to the cow's steady chewing, the faint creak of timber, the heartbeat hidden in the walls. For a moment, he feels the weight of the day that hasn't started yet, pressing softly, like a blanket rather than a burden. The air outside lightens by degrees. You can almost see the colour shift, from silver to pale blue, from hush to readiness. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster finally remembers his job and announces it with unnecessary enthusiasm. The sound ripples through the village, bouncing off roofs and half-asleep complaints. Tomlin chuckles. "Late again," he mutters, though the bird can't hear him. He stands, stretches, and rests his hand briefly on Gertrude's side. Her warmth seeps into his palm. For all the miracles told by priests and travellers, this is the one that never loses its shape. Breath meeting breath in a room that smells of earth and effort. He blows out the lantern. The smoke curls upward, twisting into the morning light like a final signature. In the dark, his eyes adjust, and the barn becomes a silhouette of simple things. Wood, straw, muscle, patience. Outside, the first full rays of dawn spill over the fields. The frost melts quietly, returning to the soil without ceremony. A thin mist rises, wrapping everything in softness. The world, briefly, looks as if it has forgiven itself. Tomlin steps out into the chill and looks up. The stars are fading, but not gone yet. He wonders, as he does every morning, if they see him too. This small figure with cold hands, standing between animal breath and open sky. Maybe they do. Maybe that's what stars are for, to remind you that insignificance, handled correctly, can feel a lot like peace. He stays there a while, long enough to feel the cold through his boots and the warmth still lingering in his chest. Then he turns back toward the cottage. Smoke already curls from the chimney. A promise of warmth, of porridge, of voices stirring. Behind him, Gertrude shifts in her stall, settles, and sighs again. The barn door swings shut with a sound like punctuation. The night is officially over. If you listen carefully, the world doesn't end with silence. It ends with surrender. The kind that means you've done what you could, loved what you had, and left the rest to the air. The stars fade, the fields brighten, and the day begins its slow rehearsal of everything ordinary and astonishing. The village, in all its muddy, ridiculous grace, keeps breathing, and somewhere a spoon catches the first light, shining like a quiet amen.